So if you take 1.9% of the entire nation's GDP, I mean, that is a massive, massive number.
Oh, absolutely. It's staggering when you actually look at it on paper.
Right. And that is exactly the 6.81 lakh crore rupee question that we're tackling today in this deep dive.
Yeah, and we're pulling this from some really detailed analytical excerpts of Chapter 12 from India's 2025-26 defense budget.
Exactly. And, the most striking part of this whole thing isn't even just the sheer amount of money being spent. It's the fact that a significant chunk of this budget is intentionally designed to be incredibly difficult to actually spend.
Which is really the defining paradox of this entire document, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're looking at these numbers, you quickly realize this isn't just a basic military ledger.
No, not at all.
You're looking at a blueprint for regional stability. And it's something that directly impacts the local tech ecosystem that you, the listener, probably interact with every single day.
Yeah, the government refers to this as Viksit Bharat at 2047. But when you dig into the structure, it reads more like a mandate that's forcing a domestic industrial revolution.
Even if it causes a lot of immediate friction in how they actually buy things.
Right, the procurement friction. Which is a great segue, actually, because to really understand that 6.81 lakh crore figure, you have to break it down. I like to think of it like managing a massive household budget.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, so, you've got the money that you absolutely need just to keep the lights on, buy groceries, feed everyone, and then you have the savings that you need to, say, upgrade the house so the roof doesn't cave in during a storm.
Right, the maintenance versus the upgrades.
Exactly. And the tension driving all this friction starts right at that structural division. So the keeping the lights on part, the revenue allocation sits at 3.11 lakh crore rupees.
And that covers the non-negotiable stuff, right?
Yeah, exactly. Salaries, rations, fueling up the jets, sea deployments, border patrols. It's inherently rigid. And that inflexibility is what's constantly squeezing the upgrade fund, the capital budget.
And the rigidity of that operational footprint, I mean, it really cannot be overstated. They got a 10.24% hike in revenue expenditure, but that's essentially just keeping pace with reality.
Just inflation and basic costs.
Exactly. You can't just decide to pause active border patrols or ground an entire jet squadron because you want to save up for a shiny new satellite.
Right. The borders don't sleep.
No, they don't. Sustaining a standing force of this massive scale, it basically consumes the lion's share of the oxygen in the room before anyone even brings up modernization.
Which brings us to the capital budget, right? The Modernization and Acquisition Fund. That sits at roughly 1.80 lakh crore. Now, I was looking at the overall pie chart for this, and that capital allocation hovers right around 26% of the total defense budget.
Yeah, about a quarter.
And here's where the math starts feeling a bit problematic to me. Is 26% actually enough to build what the source material explicitly describes as a, quote, technologically advanced combat-ready force?
Well, the short answer is no.
Okay, wow, so they admit that.
Yeah, the source material explicitly highlights this as a critical vulnerability. The document warns that, remaining stuck in this 20 to 26% bracket actually hinders the military's ability to keep pace with global tech advancements.
Because everyone else is moving so fast.
Yeah, exactly. The tech is accelerating. So when your capital pool is that constrained, you just don't have a margin for error. Every single rupee you spend has to yield compound strategic value.
Right. And because that 1.8 lakh crore is basically a hard ceiling, the Ministry of Defense is forced to completely change the underlying economics of how they buy equipment.
They're rewriting the rule book.
They really are. I mean, nearly 1.12 lakh crore, which is a massive 75% of the entire modernization budget is legally fenced off.
Yep.
It is strictly reserved for procurement from Indian defense industries.
And that is a huge shift. Reserving 3/4 of your capital budget for domestic companies is a sweeping market signal.
Because historically, that wasn't the case, right?
Not at all. Historically, a budget like this would heavily feature foreign defense contractors or, massive state-owned enterprise.
Buying off the shelf from other countries.
Right. But now there's this specific carve-out of nearly 28,000 crore earmarked just for private sector Indian firms.
Yeah.
So the mandate is shifting the actual development of indigenous fighter jets, submarines, unmanned combat aerial vehicles. All of that is moving to domestic production lines.
Okay, I understand the theory behind this Atmanirbhar Bharat self-reliance push. It sounds great on paper, but let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Sure, go for it.
If we look at the specific programs like IDEX and ADTI, they're injecting roughly 450 crore into tech startups and MSMEs.
Yeah, the micro, small, and medium enterprises.
Right. But are we seriously banking on microenterprises and venture-backed startups to engineer the hardware that defends active, volatile borders? I mean, the failure rate of startups is notoriously high. Relying on them for national security feels like, honestly, a dangerous gamble.
I get why you'd say that. It is a calculated risk. But you have to realize that the alternative is actually far more dangerous.
Oh, so?
Think about the vulnerability of foreign supply chains. Let's say a geopolitical crisis erupts.
Which happens all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a foreign original equipment manufacturer, an OEM, decides to deny you a critical software patch for your drones. Or they just halt the export of spare engine parts.
Your whole fleet is grounded.
Your military is paralyzed. You are entirely at their mercy.
Oh, wow. Okay, so the real takeaway here is that India is actively choosing short-term friction for long-term sovereignty.
Precisely. By deliberately restricting those easy, off-the-shelf foreign imports today, they are forcing the creation of an ecosystem that will make them immune to supply chain blackmail tomorrow.
Supply chain blackmail. That is a great phrase for it.
Because you aren't just buying a drone, right? You are funding the engineering ecosystem that designs the drone, that iterates the software, controls the manufacturing IP, and secures the supply chain.
It's about owning the brains behind the tech.
Exactly. And programs like IDEX, they provide that vital seed capital to tap into the agility of startups. A private tech firm can prototype, fail, and iterate an AI targeting system exponentially faster than a traditional defense bureaucracy can even, draft the initial tender.
Yeah, bureaucracies aren't really known for moving at the speed of software development.
Oh, they're definitely not.
But, that domestic pivot is really born out of necessity, primarily because of those immovable legacy costs we talked about earlier. We mentioned the rigidity of the revenue budget, but the defense pension budget is like an entirely different gravitational force.
Oh, it really is.
For 2025-26, the pension budget sits at an astounding 1.61 lakh crore.
And that figure supports over 34 lakh ex-servicemen and their dependents.
34 lakh people.
Yeah. And the budget saw a 13.87% increase this year. That accommodates for inflation, and it ensures the timely rollout of the third revision of the One Rank One Pension Scheme, or OROP.
Right. And if we look at this from a pure financial analysis standpoint, the pension budget is nearly equal to the entire capital acquisition budget.
It's neck and neck.
The country is spending almost as much paying the personnel who used to serve as it is on the next generation equipment for the personnel serving tomorrow.
And added to that, the ex-servicemen contributory health scheme, the ECHS, gets over 8,300 crore. That's a nearly 20% increase just for expanding polyclinics and super specialty hospital access.
Which honestly is like a sacred national contract.
It really represents a foundational institutional trust. You have to remember, the military relies on a volunteer force.
Right.
If the state compromises on its financial and healthcare commitments to its veterans today, the social contract completely breaks down.
And then you lose the ability to attract top-tier talent tomorrow.
Exactly. So this 1.61 lakh crore obligation, it is totally immovable.
And because it's immovable, the military is forced to find asymmetrical advantages elsewhere. If you can't just buy more troops, you have to buy smarter tech and fundamentally alter the tactical environment they operate in.
Which brings us perfectly to the physical frontiers.
Right. Let's talk about securing the actual borders.
So the physical environment is receiving some very targeted capital injections. For example, the Indian Coast Guard's overall budget increased by over 26%, reaching nearly 9,700 crore.
That's a solid jump.
But the telling metric is their capital budget specifically. That jumped by 43%.
Wait, 43% in a single year? What necessitates a jump like that for the Coast Guard?
Well, a 5,000 crore allocation is moving straight into acquisitions. We're talking advanced light helicopters, fast patrol vessels, interceptor boats.
Heavy hardware.
Yeah. The strategic environment in the Indian Ocean is changing rapidly. It requires a drastic capability boost for anti-smuggling operations and basically just achieving maritime domain awareness.
Just knowing what's out there on the water. So, moving from the coastlines all the way up to the high altitudes, the Border Roads Organization, the BRO, is receiving over 7,100 crore under the capital head.
Also a massive number.
And the source material specifically isolates key road projects. Things like the LGG Damtang Yangtze Road in Arunachal Pradesh, the Ashatima Anita Road in Jammu and Kashmir, and the Birdwal Pogolbaji Road in Rajasthan.
And to understand why those specific roads matter so much, you have to look at how they alter tactical reality.
How so?
Take an all-weather road in Arunachal Pradesh. It dramatically reduces the mobilization time for heavy artillery and troop deployments.
Oh, because you aren't waiting for the snow to clear.
Right. It fundamentally shifts the logistical calculation of any potential border conflict.
The source also emphasizes that these infrastructure projects serve a dual purpose, which I thought was fascinating.
The socioeconomic side.
Yeah. The BRO is employing 70,000 local youths. By integrating these really remote regions into the national supply chain and opening up previously inaccessible areas for tourism, the defense budget is essentially functioning as an engine for nation building.
It is a textbook example of civil-military fusion.
Yeah.
But, while the BRO alters the physical terrain, the Defense Research and Development Organization, the DRDO, is tasked with owning the invisible terrain.
The digital and tech frontiers.
Exactly. The DRDO is operating with a budget of nearly 27,000 crore, and they're heavily focused on autonomous robotics, hypersonic glide vehicles, cyber warfare, and quantum computing.
Okay, a 12.41% hike for DRDO definitely shows intent. But let's look at the global landscape for a second.
It's fiercely competitive.
Superpowers are pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into AI and space defense. Is a 27,000 crore budget, which is what, a few $billion sufficient to actually win a research and development race in quantum computing against global superpowers?
The source text provides a very stark evaluation of this exact problem.
They don't sugarcoat it.
No, not at all. India's spending on military research currently lags significantly behind major global powers. The analytical excerpts warn that incremental increases in R&D simply aren't enough when the technological landscape is advancing exponentially.
You can't just bump it up 10% a year and expect to catch up in quantum tech.
Right. Without a formidable shift in how R&D is funded, the source warns that the nation's long-term readiness is highly compromised.
But here's the kicker, right? Even if the R&D budget were to magically double overnight, the actual machinery spending the money is currently a huge bottleneck.
The bureaucracy.
Yes. The ambition of Viksit Bharat at 2047 and a 6.81 lakh crore budget, it all means nothing if structural roadblocks prevent the funds from being deployed effectively.
And the source material points directly to the lack of multi-year financial planning as a primary hurdle.
Explain how that works, or doesn't work, rather.
Well, when defense funding fluctuates on a year-to-year basis, long-term strategic projects really suffer. Imagine a domestic private firm is contracted to build a highly complex system like a submarine.
Right, which takes years.
Exactly. They cannot establish massive production lines or hire specialized engineering talent if the government might just slash their funding in the next fiscal year.
Because they'd go bankrupt.
Yep. So the source strongly recommends implementing rolling 5-year defense spending commitments. That's the only way to stabilize the industrial base so they can actually plan ahead.
And that lack of predictability ties directly into the second major roadblock, procurement process optimization. The bureaucratic hurdles required to acquire defense technology are causing severe delays.
It's agonizingly slow.
I compare it to giving someone a massive gift card, but making the checkout process so complicated that the technology they're trying to buy is already obsolete by the time the transaction actually clears.
That is exactly what happens. It's like trying to upgrade your computer's operating system, but the download takes so long that by the time it finally installs, the software is already out of date.
And those procurement delays directly trigger the third roadblock, which is the underutilization of funds.
Yeah, lapsing funds. Because the bureaucratic checkout process is so incredibly slow, the military frequently struggles to actually spend its allocated capital budget within the financial year.
So the money just goes back to the Treasury.
Basically, yeah. Which is why the text demands strict accountability measures. They want a transparent tracking system established to prevent these capital inefficiencies from happening in the first place.
So when you synthesize all of this, the budget constraints, the mandate for domestic manufacturing, and the crippling bureaucracy, the geopolitical picture becomes very clear.
Incremental upgrades just won't cut it anymore.
No. To avoid falling behind global defense leaders, India has to simultaneously reform its internal procurement machinery while rapidly scaling up its domestic tech sector.
It requires a completely proactive, technology-driven approach, because the true measure of this budget success will not be that headline 6.81 lakh crore figure.
What will it be then?
The real success will be measured by whether the defense establishment can clear out its bureaucratic arteries fast enough to let that 75% domestic allocation actually reach the innovators, the ones building the next generation of strategic assets.
Wow. We have definitely covered a lot of ground today, unpacking how a nation balances the immovable gravity of legacy costs, like pensions, against the really urgent requirement to secure supply chain sovereignty.
Yeah, that tension is everything.
And this massive shift from simply buying foreign capability off the shelf to forcing a domestic industrial revolution that is the defining narrative of this entire allocation.
The overarching theme here, for you listening, is this transition toward absolute strategic autonomy. Every financial mechanism in this document, despite the current inefficiencies, is engineered to pull the defense sector away from external reliance. You're not just reading about money, you're seeing the architecture of a self-reliant power.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought that builds on the changing nature of these investments. We are seeing capital steadily migrating away from traditional heavy machinery and flowing toward AI, cyber capabilities, and autonomous systems.
The new battlefield.
Exactly. So as that trend accelerates globally, it begs the question, how long will it be until the ultimate front line of national security is no longer a physical border guarded by a soldier, but a line of code actively defending a server in a local startup incubator?
It's wild to think about. The definition of a boundary is fundamentally changing. The perimeter is moving from the physical to the digital realm, and that alters the very nature of conflict.
It changes the entire paradigm of what a defense budget is even supposed to buy in the 21st century.
It really does.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning the numbers.